Are you missing the mark on the BCBA exam or the scores on your mock exam? It might not just be your knowledge, it could also be the way that you're approaching questions. In this video, I'm going to give you the best tips that I have for nailing down these questions and giving you a clear process when answering these more difficult types of questions. Hey, I'm Nick and I'm a total behavior nerd. Over the past 6 years, I've been teaching test prep to BCBAs and have helped hundreds if not thousands of students pass their BCBA exams. I've broken this video down into our must-have tips, our situational tips, and then at the end we'll talk about the tips that we need to get rid of. Let's hop right into our must-have tips. The first must-have tip is to focus on what the question is asking. This is most often detailed in the last sentence of a question. Many questions are designed to be very misleading, and it's really easy to get lost, especially in the longer questions. Here are some strategies that you can use to focus and stay oriented on that. First, when you are approaching a longer question, you can read the last sentence of the longer question first. This will help show you what you need to orient to immediately when you're approaching the question. Before you seal your answer, make sure you reread that last sentence to make sure that your answer is actually answering what the question is asking about. It sounds simple, but you would be surprised how many students make errors just because they're answering something that the question actually isn't asking about. Especially if you're a person with a bouncy brain, it's really important to stay oriented, and that's why this is our first must-have tip. The second must-have tip for answering these questions is to provide your rationale for every question. In your rationale, it should include a couple different things. So obviously, first you want to explain why you think the answer that you chose is correct. And of course, going back to our first tip, we want to relate it back to what that question is actually asking about. Next up, we want to compare it to the other answers, and this is where students often get tripped up. So not only do we want a reason to support why is our answer good, but we want reasons to support why is our answer better than the other answers. Especially if you're a person where you're like, I can often get it down to 2 answer options and then I don't really know what to do. This is for you here. And what you need to do is to compare and contrast the different answer options. So if you get down to those two, decide what is the difference between these 2 answer options. Highlight those differences and then compare them back to our original question. How do those differences better match up with what the question needs or is asking about? Let's take a look at this question where we can try the strategy out. Whenever Tara smells her grandmother's perfume, she immediately feels a sense of comfort, similar to when she was younger and spent time with her grandmother. What type of stimulus is her grandmother's perfume in relation to Tara's feeling of comfort? Alright, so we have as our answer options A, SD, B, MO, C, CS, and D, US. So first thing we might want to look at is what the question is asking. So what type of stimulus is her grandmother's perfume in relation to Tara's feeling of comfort? So we're talking about a stimulus-response relationship. Now pause the video real quick. Is a stimulus-response relationship, is that usually more about our operant conditioning stimuli, or is it going to be more related to our respondent conditioning stimuli? And let's go ahead and check that out. That's going to be more of our respondent terms. So immediately we can cross off A and B as our operant stimuli, and C and D are the final 2 answers that we're going to be wrestling with. Okay, so now what we can do, we're down to our final 2 answers. We're curious about which one is actually correct. What we can do now is compare the difference between these 2. We have unconditioned stimulus, and then we have a conditioned stimulus. So unconditioned stimulus is an eliciting stimulus that doesn't need pairing to get its power. And now our conditioned stimulus is an eliciting stimulus that requires previous pairing to gain its power. So let's look back at our question now. What type of stimulus is her grandmother's perfume in relation to Tara's feeling of comfort? Well, if we look in the back in here now, it looks like that there was previous pairing here. So that her grandmother's perfume was paired with this sense of comfort like she was when she was younger. So now that we see that this does have this pairing history, we can very confidently seal our answer as CS. If you struggle with test anxiety, providing your rationales is the way to conquer that. What we see here is like a lot of anxious individuals will constantly go back and forth between their final two answers. But if you have a rationale and you have the proper evidence to support your answer and state why it's better than the other answer, then you're going to be much more confident when you actually seal your answer in. And more practice with that is going to help conquer that anxiety. And if you keep practicing bouncing between the last two answers and then like getting 50-50 of them right, so it's getting reinforced on like this VR2 schedule, it's probably going to maintain your anxiety, and you're just going to be bad at tests forever, whether you get through this one or not. So again, the way to conquer that is get lots of practice with your rationales and provide the evidence for why you actually think an answer is better than the other answers. Let's hop into our next category, the pretty useful tips. So these are going to be a little bit more situational, but absolutely are useful in those situations if you can identify the proper ones to use it for. Our first tip, we're going to call it play it out. And this tip is most useful in intervention and supervision style questions. Let's talk about what the play it out strategy is. So what we're doing is when we're looking at some of these answer options, when we're down to a few, we can use this strategy to kind of think through in real practice, what are we actually doing here? And what this does is it sometimes illuminates some things that go really well or some things that aren't going to go really well with a certain procedure or a certain approach. Let's look at this question for an example. Selena receives ABA services in her kindergarten setting where she is one of 15 students. Her teacher mentioned that as the only adult in the classroom, he is struggling with Selena's elopement to the courtyard outside the classroom where she typically will stop and smell the flowers. Assuming the function is to access the flowers, which of the following interventions is most appropriate? So our first thing here is we're going to orient to what the question is actually asking about. So it says, assuming the function is to access the flowers, what is the most appropriate intervention? So we're selecting an intervention for this elopement that has a tangible access function. So let's look at our answer options. We have when Selena elopes, physically block and or stop her, then put her in timeout. Okay, so we can use our play it out strategy with each of these. So if we do that, we saw earlier that the teacher is the only adult in the classroom, so this might be a little bit difficult. I don't know if the teacher's just gonna always be able to get there and block her and then put her in timeout and keep her in timeout as the only teacher. The play it out strategy shows us real fast that this option is not gonna really be that great. Let's look at option B. Take all the children out to the courtyard at scheduled times throughout the day, non-contingently. Okay, so we have like an NCR for access to this. Thinking about like the one teacher, like, yeah, the teacher could do that. He can just move from all the classroom to the courtyard, have all the kids. I think that sounds kind of doable. So this one's cool for now. Let's check out option C. Lock the door so it cannot be opened, which will put the behavior on extinction. So let's think about that. Does it put the behavior on extinction so the door does not open when she's there? So trying to elope does not result in the elopement and does not result in the flowers. So that is extinction. It's still a function-based intervention. But is there any issue with this? Like, yeah, when we do play it out, like think about potential issues. Like, that's a fire safety hazard. It's also like just like a general hazard. I don't think like in most states like you can have one teacher in a classroom and have a locked door. Like usually you have to have an open door. So that intervention option is just not going to work because there's some safety issues and potentially some legal issues there as well. And then let's look at option D. Teach Selena to go to, ask to go to the courtyard and reinforce each use of functional communication. Okay, cool. So yeah, we're doing DRA here. Usually that is a pretty good intervention option. And think about, we have one teacher and he's got 15 students in this classroom. And can we just let like this kindergartner like go to the courtyard alone though? And usually, like, you might think, like, yeah, DRA is really our best option most of the time, but I don't think this is really going to be suitable with our one teacher. So we probably wouldn't have seen that if we didn't do our play it out strategy with this option. But I think this actually makes option B much better because it is something that the teacher can do. But a lot of people, when they see DRA as an intervention option, are like, yeah, that's the best intervention, totally. But if we didn't do the played out strategy, we may have missed that it's actually not going to be feasible with the one teacher. And B is going to be a function-based intervention that is feasible with the teacher. So the answer to this question is going to be B. This next tip here is also going to be really useful for those more abstract questions like in intervention and supervision, where you kind of are working like with a broader set of information or a broader set toolbox, and then kind of like narrowing down what we need here. And this is kind of similar and applicable to our last question that we just saw with Selena, that we're going to use the NCR for her to access the courtyard flowers for. So in this one, here are the things to look at in those best answer style questions. First of all is that you want to match the intervention to the assessment information that you have. So in that previous question, we had information about the function of the behavior. So we knew we were going to choose a function-based intervention, obviously. And that's often going to be the most important thing, is that we're using something that's function-based. You also want to think about things that are listed on the task list here. So things such as like environmental supports or resource constraints that are in the environment. So we saw that in our last question too, with just the single teacher. The DRA was going to be a little bit more difficult. The intensity of the behavior. So like how difficult is this behavior to manage, or like how much disruption is it actually causing in the environment or impeding on learning, and things like that. And then you want to think about behavioral interventions that are effective and feasible. So is this going to work? Is it function-based, and is it going to be strong enough? And feasible, can we implement it with the supports that we have? So kind of think about those details. Oftentimes, one or two of those things are going to kind of outweigh some of the other ones. So function-based is always going to be priority. If the intervention isn't function-based, it's probably not going to be very effective. But then you want to think about, like, again, effective and feasible. Is this going to work, and can we do it? And if it's if one intervention option like does one of those things better than another intervention option, then you should choose that one. Our next situational tip is going to be what to do when you face double negatives. So here, let's say you come up with an example that says, like, which of the following is not an unwanted effect of reinforcement? What we could do there is we can cross off the not and we can cross off the un, and we can look at it and see which one is a wanted effect of reinforcement. And that might make it a lot easier to see in our answer options. Note that it's not going to work 100% of the time. So if it says it's not an unwanted effect of reinforcement, it could also be like an unwanted effect of punishment, for example. So not necessarily a desired effect of reinforcement. But sometimes that tip becomes useful just to see things in a different way. And to, again, sometimes when you just look at something a little bit differently, you'll see something new that will highlight a correct answer for you. And if you want to give some of these question answering strategies a shot, I recommend that you check out the UB mini mocks for mastery, where you can get 2 free mini mocks. Just join the link in the description below. All you need to do is scroll down and click on the section where it says free mini mocks, and you can access those. These are mixed mini mocks, so they're scattered across the task list, and they should be really fun for you, so give it a go if you haven't. Also, on our shop, you can buy the full package of mini mocks, as well as the Beat the Beast mock. We have them for very reasonable prices. The Ultimate Mock Bundle has these 2 packages together for just $115. They're great quality products, so check them out if you're looking for some quality questions to practice with. As promised, here are now the tips that you need to discard. The first one is to never change your answers. Like, why? Why would you never change your answers? Hopefully you know what I'm going to say already. So never changing your answers. That's a tip for people who are super anxious and like will change their answers without like much reasoning. But if you continue to practice providing your rationales and get some confidence in your answers and confidence in your rationales, build that up. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is going to happen with some practice. Then what you should do is you should change your answers if you can come up with a better rationale. So screw that never changing your answers. Do it the right way. If you can come up with a better rationale to support a different answer choice, then you should change your answers. I took my BCBA exam 7 years ago now, but to give you a little bit of insight, I think I flagged 20 or so questions on my BCBA exam, and I ended up changing, I think, between 9 and 11 of them. I forget if it was 9 or 11 because it's like the opposite. But anyway, I changed quite a few of them, almost half of them or about half of them. So again, if you can come up with a better rationale, you should change your answers. And yes, I did pass on my first attempt. The next one is doing pattern-based responding. What I mean here is like kind of like switching up your answers based on what the previous answers were on your exam. So like if you had like 3 C's in a row, like it can't be C again. Or if it's like, oh, if it was A, B, C, then the next one's gotta be D. Just no. Just no. And same thing, come up with rationales. If you can support it, it doesn't matter the pattern. Like your whole test could be C, and if you have the rationales to support it, I say go ahead and submit that. Another thing that you need to stop doing is stop doing a ton of mock exams without analyzing your mistakes. A ton of mock exams, I think if you've done like 4 or 5 mock exams, I think that's a lot of mock exams. And it's okay, like if you've spent some time with them, and it's okay if that's been over like multiple attempts, but I'm saying like 4 or 5 mock exams for like 1 or 2 attempts. That's kind of a lot. And if you're not really spending the time and like digesting those questions and analyzing like why you're getting those wrong and your scores aren't really improving, that's what you need to do is you need to go back, sit with those feedback reports, understand why you got your errors. And that can be for a ton of different reasons. We'll probably make another video about that soon, about like how you can error on these questions and how to wrestle with that. But for now, just make sure you are spending tons of time with the feedback and understanding why your questions are why you got something incorrect and rectifying those errors for your future exams and practice questions. Last thing that you need to stop doing is spending too much time on low quality questions. There's just straight up a lot of bad test content out there. I feel like with ChatGPT and all these AI wave, like it's getting worse actually, because people think they can just like get ChatGPT to write a bunch of questions. It just like does not work. Trust me, I've tried it. So if you see a low quality question, like don't waste your time with it. I've seen people just like stress themselves out for days and even weeks on like these low quality questions. If it doesn't make sense, if it seems like there's 2 possible answers, there probably is. It's probably just a bad question, and just move on from it. Don't stress yourself out from it. Oh, and if you're looking for higher quality questions, you know where to find them. Anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this video. I hope you enjoyed all of the things that we talked about today, and hopefully you find these tips useful for conquering this BCBA exam. Let me know in the comments below any other tips that you have found really useful for the BCBA exam, or maybe ones that you haven't found very useful, or maybe they're tips that you want to know if they're useful. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll let you know what I think about those tips and whether you should hold on to them. But thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope you have a lovely day. I hope you pass this exam soon. And if not, I hope to see you in my streams and all the other places soon. Laters!